Everyone to this Friday afternoon visual politics seminar. It's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Charlotte-Rose Millar for a seminar on images of the sacred, how emotions shape beliefs about supernatural narratives. Before I say a few words about Charlotte's work, I just want to say this is sort of a nice way of illustrating the variety of sort of research we're trying to bring together in the program. We have Charlotte's work who deals with early modern sort of humanities type of research, and I'll say a few more words about how I find it's wonderful how she bridges disciplines and makes that relevant to people in other sort of fields, including me. And then next Wednesday we have a seminar by Dan Angus on the use of computers, sort of massive mega computers for the analysis of huge amounts of visual data, so very much from the extreme end of the social science to, I wouldn't say the extreme end of the humanities, but very different kind of research. But all in some sense with the idea of bringing the visual together, different aspects of the visual. And to me that's sort of what makes research interesting, is when people come together from completely different disciplinary backgrounds, sort of put their disciplinary blinders away and try to learn and communicate across disciplines, conventions, and so on. So Charlotte is a UQ Fellow in the Institute of Advanced Studies here. She is also affiliated with the Center for the History of Emotions, and besides the visual, that's one of the other sort of overlapping interests I have in common with Charlotte's work. She has a book out with Routledge called Witchcraft, the Devil and Emotions in Early Modern England, and I've read some of Charlotte's work, and I've read a grant proposal and project proposal, and I was amazed by, you know, as I said, on one level she does very different work than I come from political science and we do, and yet I found the kind of way she manages to bring aspects of early modern sort of life to make it relevant for today, to in terms of religion, in terms of emotions. I found that was extremely compelling and fascinating, and as a result I very much look forward to what Charlotte has to present today. And as always, the idea for our sort of seminars is we only go for an hour to make it easier for people, especially late on a Friday afternoon. And if okay, Charlotte will present sort of for maximum about 30 minutes, which should give us plenty less, or less is fine. But the idea is we have a dialogue, you know, with the idea that people present work in progress, get constructive, friendly feedback, and that we have enough of a conversation across the table to help Charlotte with her work, and hopefully you walk away and feel like this has helped.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
But thank you very much for joining us and for presenting your work.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, and thanks so much for inviting me to talk today. It's really given me a chance to think about how the visual interconnects with my work, which is something with this new project I hadn't done so much before, and it's been extremely productive, so thank you. But when I was first thinking about this paper, I realised that it almost seemed like a contradiction in terms. A paper on ghosts for a seminar focusing on the visual. Now, ghosts are not exactly known for their visuality, but even though ghosts do come from an unseen world, both today and in the past, people do regularly claim to see ghosts. Although having said this, many supernatural encounters with the ghostly realm do not involve a physical sighting. Rather, both now and in the past, ghost accounts often involve more of a feeling of something creepy, an unusual noise or a sound. More often than not, people will talk about a feeling of a presence, and it's this feeling that leads them to believe that they saw, or at least experienced, a ghost. Yet at the same time, if I asked all of you to describe a ghost, I imagine you would have similar answers. White, probably, or most definitely translucent. The more dramatic among you might think of a bedsheet and possibly even jangling chains. And probably you would expect the ghost to be humanoid, even to resemble someone that you once knew. None of you, I imagine, would have any problem recognising these as ghosts. This one also might seem obvious to you, although you might have more trouble with this one, which I'll come back to later. In many ways, though, ghosts are described in terms of emotions rather than physical shape. So today I want to talk about two interrelated things: the feelings that ghosts evoke, especially feelings of terror and fear, and the way in which ghosts and ghostly apparitions were represented visually. Although I've started by talking about the present, my work on ghosts and apparitions, all of which is very new, I should add, focuses predominantly on 16th and 17th century England. But in the same way that we today talk about strange apparitions or ghosts making themselves known by a certain feeling, so too did men and women in early modern England. In fact, for these men and women, the feeling that a ghost evoked could actually tell them what they were dealing with, whether it was a ghost, another form of apparition, an angel, or, most dangerously, a devil masquerading as a ghost. So let me start with some background, as I'm sure most of you are not early modern historians. So in 16th and 17th century England, ghosts represented a key point of tension between pre- and post-Reformation belief. In pre-Reformation doctrine, ghosts could be one of three things: being sent from God, being sent from the devil, or the departed souls of the dead. Post-Reformation England's official rejection of the doctrine of purgatory should have meant the figurative death of the ghost as dead person, yet it didn't. For centuries after the Reformation, ghost stories flourished, with a significant proportion of these stories featuring tales of murdered men and women coming back to life to avenge their deaths, of the dead unable to rest until they had righted a societal wrong, or even of helpful spirits returning from the grave to do chores around the house, which are my favourite type of spirits. Despite the early modern emphasis on ghosts as angels or demons, many men and women still had an emotional reaction to what they believed was the spirit of a departed person. Emotional experience was fundamental to how ghosts were interpreted and, I suggest, crucial to their continuation within a process of large-scale religious conversion. Some authors even claimed at the time that by examining one's own emotional reaction to a ghost, it was actually possible to decipher whether the ghost was angelic, demonic, or departed soul. So one of the aspects that I'm exploring in this new project is the idea that strong emotional reactions allow us to understand how ghosts were interpreted in post-Reformation England, and in turn help us to understand why Protestant efforts to dismiss ghosts as angels or demons backfired. By examining affective responses to ghosts in early modern England, I hope to shed light not just on how ghosts were interpreted, but also highlight how studying past emotions can nuance and enhance our understanding of changing religious and supernatural beliefs. Now, although Protestant understandings of ghosts did allow for an interpretation of these spirits as angelic missionaries with a divine mission, it was far more common for them to be interpreted as demonic apparitions. And this is the idea that you might think that you see your dead grandmother appear, but actually she's the devil, and she's just taking the form of your dead grandmother because it's a sympathetic form and you're going to be tricked. Now, this attempted demonization was part of a large-scale and ongoing Protestant emphasis on the increasing power of the devil in the world, and a corresponding elevation of God and the devil as the two main forces in a cosmic struggle for human souls. Ghosts were not the only supernatural beings that were being appropriated for this cause, with many popular spirits such as fairies, brownies, familiars, and others being similarly demonized. With the message of ghosts as demonic in place from the mid-16th century, by the late 17th century, ghosts should have well and truly been replaced by demons, yet they weren't. In fact, during the second half of the 17th century, the circulation of ghost stories actually reached new heights. Rather than introducing a new concept of the ghost as demon, Protestant reformers succeeded primarily in introducing a much greater sense of ambiguity and confusion into people's understanding of what exactly a ghost was. For the majority, ghosts were not reinterpreted as demons. Rather, ghosts became imbued with demonic attributes. And I'll show you some images in a moment. So I think what I need to do here is talk a bit about how the devil was represented in early modern England, and then explore how some of these devilish characteristics became interwoven with depictions of ghosts. So one of the main ways that we hear about the devil in post-Reformation England is in accounts of witchcraft. In the early modern world, witches were believed to be people who had sold their soul to the devil in exchange for malefic powers. But in English witchcraft narratives, the devil often appeared differently from how we might expect today. In most of Europe, the devil looked much as we would think. Humanoid, cloven-hoofed is the word there, cloven-hoofed, and often horned. So we have this one, which is Johann Jacob's Wick depiction of a witch's Sabbath. So you have one devil in the middle, he has his horns and his cloven feet. You have another one at the front who is bending over so that the witch can kiss him on the buttocks, which is a form of allegiance known as the obscene kiss. That's just for you on Friday afternoon. I did leave out the demon being filleted though, but you can email me about that. There's a couple of green devils as well, but you can see that they're quite easily recognisable as devils, mainly from the horns and the cloven hoofs. Also, this one is Francesca Maria Guazzo. That's an early depiction of the devil, and once again he has cloven hoofs. He has some wings, but he has the horns as well, and he looks quite humanoid. Now in England we still do have images of the devil as humanoid. Wrong image. Yes, we do. Also, I should say though, this is why this image is here, the devil does usually appear humanoid, but he can also appear as a goat. So you may not see him, he's down there, peeking out. So this is Hansbald and Green's Weather Witches, and they look beautiful, but that's a trick of the devil. Once again, they're trying to seduce you, and the devil is lingering below there. Do I have another goat? Yes. And this is Goya's Witches' Sabbath with a goat as the devil as well. But the cloven hoofs sort of carry across both of them. But this is generally how we see the devil in European sources. Now, as I said, in England we do also see this type of devil. Yes. So this is from The Kingdom of Darkness, which is a book published in 1688 by Nathaniel Crouch. And you can see that there are little devils there dancing with witches. They have the horns and they have the cloven hoofs. So they're in England as well. But in most English witchcraft cases, the devil actually takes quite a different appearance, which is that of a familiar spirit. So a familiar spirit, if anyone has seen Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or Charmed, or read Harry Potter, or read Philip Pullman, familiar spirits are little animals, basically, that take the form of animals, but they're actually the devil in animal form, and they're sort of like witches' helpers. So I have some here. We have a black cat down the bottom. This is from 1619, this image. Black cat, we have the rat, there's an owl up there, and then my favourite is the poodle in the corner. That is described as a poodle, but it's the devil. And writers do actually explicitly say that the devil chooses these cute shapes because, once again, that it's more appealing than the hoofed guy. So this is how we see the devil quite commonly in early modern England, both humanoid, but also there's a very strong connection with the devil as animal. So why am I showing you these images? Well, mainly because of some other images that sort of got me into this project to begin with, like these. So this is a pamphlet about Black Shuck. He is a demonic dog, but he is not a familiar. So let me tell you a little bit about him. On the 4th of August, 1577, in the small town of Bungay, 15 miles south of Norwich, there was a great tempest of violent rain, lightning and thunder. The townspeople were assembled in the parish church, and they felt the church quake and stagger, which struck into their hearts a sure and sudden fear that they were in a manner robbed of their right wits. It was in this moment of fear, at the heart of the storm, that a black dog, this black dog, appeared with such flashes of fire that those present felt that the day of judgment had arrived. This dog, or the devil in such a likeness as the pamphlet says, ran swiftly through the church and wrung the necks of 2 kneeling parishioners who died instantly. The devil dog then attacked another of the congregation, giving him a gripe on his back that made him draw up and shrink as if he were a piece of leather scorched in a hot fire. According to the Reverend Fleming's printed account of this supernatural event, the dog's claw-like paw prints can still be seen in Bungay's church door. Now, of course, that's ridiculous. They're actually in the church the parish over, and you can still see them today. The devil dog also appeared that same day in the parish church of Bilberry, which is where you can see his paw prints if you're so inclined. And there he killed 3 men and a lad and burned the hand of another. Now today, this demon dog has been associated with Black Shuck, which is a black dog that is said to haunt East Anglia, and is also what the Grim in Harry Potter is based on. And he's meant to foretell death, as the Harry Potter fans will know, of anyone unfortunate enough to encounter him. But for the parishioners of late 16th century Bungay, this dog was a terrifying demonic entity, one that struck fear into their hearts and inspired repentance. Reverend Fleming's pamphlet account leaves no doubt that this demonic dog is a wonder and a spectacle, no doubt, of God's judgment. It is, in his words, a wonderful example of God's wrath, no doubt to terrify us, that we might scare him for his justice, or pulling back our footsteps from the paths of sin to love him for his mercy. But although Fleming describes the dog both as a wonder and as a devil, he does not, like in later accounts of Black Shuck, describe it as ghostly. But as we shall see, demonic animals could be interpreted as ghosts during this period, and there is a slippage here. So another narrative, this time from 1688, further blurs the line between the animal, the demonic, and the ghostly. Now this ghost first appears as a bee, then a raven, and then in the shape of Thomas Hind, who passed away 3 months previously and was the former overseer for the poor in Barnet. So these are all the same ghost, the bee, the raven, and the man. Now Thomas cannot rest until the poor have had their due, and I'll talk more about him later. Although the bee and the raven are not explicitly described in demonic terms, the common associations between animals and familiars during this period would be suggestive to most readers. This ghost has been represented both in a shape with demonic connotations and as a real person who is recognisable by those who saw him. They identify him as Thomas Hind. Another ghost, this time from 1661, appeared to a servant as a black cat, but later took a humanoid shape, and we also have numerous accounts of other ghosts appearing as black dogs before transforming into recognisable humans. As is evident from the growing number of popular pamphlets about ghosts that circulated in 17th century England, far from being cast out, ghosts remained and were not only associated with the dead, but also with the animal and the demonic. Another example comes from a 1683 pamphlet. The anonymous pamphleteer also describes a terrifying ghost. This female ghost is described both as a spectrum and as a demon, and while a male ghost in the same pamphlet only seeks to right the wrongs of his lifetime, this female ghost, full of malice, seemed only concerned with attacking her husband's former servant. Among other indignities, this demonic apparition strangles her husband's former servant with his own cravat, many witnesses see this as well, and bloodies his head by sticking it between bedposts. She also continuously pulls his wigs off his head. Finally, one night she kidnaps him and leaves him in an ecstatic fit in a field. The man is only freed from her grasp on praying to Almighty God not to suffer the devil to destroy him. Now this woman, we are told, appears sometimes in her own shape, sometimes in forms very horrid, and now and then like a monstrous dog which belches fire. She also appeared once as a horse, and she was once suspected to have taken the shape of a bird when a bird attacked the young man. Both in shape and intention, this ghost is clearly demonic. I don't have a picture of her, unfortunately. Yet rather than being a demon as such, the woman is still believed to be the soul of a dead woman, one who is known to be wicked in life, and a specific woman. So here we see perhaps the effect of Protestant conceptions of the ghost as demonic, merging with older and more pervasive ideas as the ghost is departed soul. On reading early modern ghost pamphlets, it becomes increasingly clear that fear played a central role in the vast majority of these narratives, and I would argue that this fear stems at least in part from the ambiguity and confusion between the ghostly and the demonic. Authors of ghost stories were keen to outline several points: the reason for a ghost's appearance, the shape of the ghost, and how it appeared. Yet equally important to these authors seems to be the emotion that ghosts engendered in their often unhappy subjects. So I'll give you a few examples, also from pamphlets. In 1662, a spirit with long flaxen hair in green clothes without a hat and bare-legged appeared to 28-year-old Isabel Binnington. The spirit, after much prompting and inquiry, both from Isabel herself and from a local justice of the peace, revealed that he was murdered 21 years ago by 3 women. He also, before vanishing, hinted at a plot against the king. Another story, this time from 1675, told how a ghost appeared to one Richard Clark at his home in Northamptonshire. The ghost explained that he had been murdered 267 years, 9 weeks and 2 days ago. He insisted that Clark go to Southwark in London to his family home and find and dispose of money and papers buried under the floor. He does actually do that, and they find the papers and everyone comes and looks. In a case from 1680, a female ghost dressed all in white appears to Elizabeth Freeman, calls her sweetheart, and insists that she warned King Charles not to remove his parliament and to stand by his counsel. Now in all of these narratives, the ghost comes back for a reason, and generally, if the person approached did as the ghost instructed, the ghost vanishes. Of course, not everyone, sadly, is prepared to follow ghostly instruction, although a surprisingly high number of people were. I've already referred to the case in which Thomas Hind, this one here, appeared to Henry Taylor in the shape of a bee, a raven, and finally of himself. Thomas claims that he has come back because some members of his parish have held back parcels of money which should have been distributed to the poor, and he cannot rest until this has been righted. Unfortunately, the man he appears to, Henry Barnett, refuses to help, and by the end of the narrative he is still being regularly haunted by an increasingly violent ghost. But what about emotion? By tracking the emotions attributed to ghostly encounters in early modern England, it is possible to understand how these beings were interpreted, and perhaps come some little way to understanding their continuation in both popular and educated belief. As I mentioned, the key emotion attributed to ghost sightings was fear, even terror. So in this project, I'm choosing to look for references to emotion through combining methodologies from Barbara Rosenwein and Monique Scheer, 2 key scholars of the history of emotions. Rosenwein advocates for the use of close textual analysis to read emotions in history, whereas Scheer focuses on how emotions are expressed bodily. Combining these two approaches allows us to build up a nuanced and detailed picture of how fear of ghosts was understood. So, reflecting on these cases, we find that Isabel Binnington, the man the ghost appeared to her bare-legged, she was so sore or frighted at the ghost's appearance that she began to sweat exceedingly. Richard Clarke's reaction differs according to which of the three accounts of the case we choose to follow. A ballad narrating the story wrote that Richard was much amazed at the ghost's appearance and that the ghost told Richard not to be afraid. An anonymous pamphleteer claimed that Richard was much frightened when he first saw the ghost, but the ghost then did tell him not to fear. And a third narrative, this time in the form of a letter, presents a much nastier ghost, one who pursued Richard and put him in such a fright that he could not run any further and fell down. Now, this version of the ghost also threatens Richard's cattle. It is only Elizabeth Freeman that seems to take her ghost's entreaty not to fear to heart. The others do seem genuinely terrified. Fear and terror were also described in bodily terms. Henry Taylor of Barnet was so affrighted by the uncouth apparition haunting his house that he durst not lie in his bed one night, but he went and lay with one of his lodgers. Colonel Hewson, when charged with treason by a vengeful ghost, fell into a fainting sweat. Another victim of a haunting, Sarah Davis, was so terrified at seeing the ghost of her father that she fell down as though she were dead. Perhaps the most potent reminder of the very real bodily fear induced by ghosts is the women who, on seeing the ghosts of a Civil War army parading up the main road at Kenton, miscarried out of fear. Pamphleteers and witnesses to ghost encounters use a number of words to describe the affective resonances of their experience. These descriptors appear constantly in ghostly print. Fright, fear, and terror are all common, as is amazement, a term used in this context to encompass overwhelming fear, terror, bewilderment, alarm, and surprise. Consternation was also common, a word implying such amazement and terror as to actually affect one's faculties. When these descriptors are combined with the bodily images of fear that I've just discussed, we begin to get a sense of the great fear that ghosts were believed to provoke. But while there is no doubt that fear of ghosts occurred, the beliefs driving this fear are harder to unpick. So attempting to unpack this fear from a distance of over 300 years is no easy feat. While it would be wrong to claim any power to understand the inner workings of the 17th century psyche, it is possible to look at how ghostly fear was described and the cultural context of ghost beliefs, to attempt to understand more about the emotions that these encounters engendered. A key point here becomes how ordinary men and women understood ghosts. So far, the images I've shown you suggest that ghosts and devils became strongly enmeshed in the popular consciousness. But numerous historians have stressed that the Protestant vision of the demonic ghost was conveyed to the populace rather unsuccessfully, or, as Peter Marshall has put it, in muffled tones. One of the key reasons for this lack of success was likely that in many cases ghosts did not actually behave as devils. While some ghosts did appear and attempt to hurt or maim, and then thus could feasibly be interpreted as devils, for the majority ghosts turned up to right wrongs, to unearth buried treasure, or to otherwise help the living. So take for example the ghost who would not rest until the terms of his will had been fulfilled. This ghost employs his former servant to take money to a woman who has been overlooked. Or this ghost, who I showed you earlier, who came back from the dead because he felt that his granddaughter needed his assistance. Although I should just add, for further confusion, this seemingly good ghost also appears as a black cat and a goat, both sure signs of the devil, and makes hideous groans and moans that terrify the neighbours and cause them to call the police. But generally, for most ordinary early modern Protestants, ghosts who come back to do the good were not really easily reconciled with a fiend from hell. This comes through in visual sources. Although we do have images of ghosts that imply a demonic association, by the late 17th century, most ghosts were portrayed in fairly neutral humanoid terms. So, apologies for the quality of some of these. This one here is an account of the ghost or apparition of the late Duke of Buckingham's father, and he's just standing by the bedside. It's very hard to tell he's a ghost from the picture. He just looks like a normal person. This one is the same image that's been reused, which I think is interesting because it's very common for people to reuse images in cheap print in this period because it's cheap print, so you've just got woodcuts that stand in for things. But you often have an image that stands in for a ghost or a devil that everyone will recognise. So this one does seem to circulate quite a lot as being representative of a ghost. This one here I found recently. The ghost is the sort of more slight looking one over there, slightly, but it's hard to tell. This one is the apparition of Cardinal Wolsey, wearing his hat, that you really can't tell from the pamphlet he's a ghost either. And then I'll get to that in a sec. Yeah, so as I was going to say, quite a few of these images do actually depict the ghosts wearing their shrouds that they were buried in, which I think is really quite interesting. And something I didn't realise until I put this talk together, so thank you. So you can see, it's not as clear on this one, but the next one, all these 4 little people have got their burial shrouds that they would have been buried in wrapped around them, which I think really for me is sort of a quite potent symbol that these are meant to be real people coming back from the dead, because they have been buried. And we have more of them, like that one. And that one there as well. And that one, I think, is my last one. So when we add to these ghosts that are doing good the fact that they often resembled a person's dead mother or sister or brother or neighbour, it becomes easier to understand why most men and women were not inclined to reinterpret seemingly friendly spectres as the devil. Excuse me. So there are clearly multiple meanings of ghosts circulating in early modern England. Are they devils, demonic ghosts, or simply returned souls? One crucial factor to consider when looking at these narratives is the differing influences at play. Pamphlets are made up of a rich set of influences, including those brought by the pamphleteer, but also direct and paraphrased testimony from witnesses and victims of hauntings. For example, in one pamphlet from 1675, the pamphleteer attempts to recast a seemingly friendly ghost as the devil by comparing the damage the ghost has done to the devil's work. However, within the pamphlet, godly ministers, so Protestant Puritan ministers, described in the narrative as encouraging the victim of the haunting to actually engage with the ghost, to talk to it, and to do what it says. And when the ghost turns up in Southwark, thousands of ordinary men and women come to try and see the ghost. So you can see the different levels just in the pamphlets themselves. So a large part of this project as it evolves will really be unpicking these different influences to try and understand how differing beliefs entered into and circulated within popular print. Although ghost beliefs did not meld exactly to new Protestant conceptions of the ghost as devil, as I've already suggested, these ideas did influence popular depictions, with many ghosts taking on more demonic attributes than previously. As Joe Barth has noted, this ghost, with its extra features borrowed from the demon, was clearly a more frightening entity than before. That is not to say that pre-Reformation ghosts weren't frightening, they certainly could be, but that the ambiguous nature of early modern ghosts and their tinge of diabolical agency imbued them with unpredictability, confusion, and uncertainty, and this could invoke terror in those unfortunate enough to encounter them. Stories of men and women fearing ghosts do not just tell us about fear of ghosts alone. They also shed light on fear of the devil, fear of death, fear of providence, and fear of divine retribution. In examining the causes and expressions of early modern fear in relation to ghostly narratives, we can come closer to understanding the varying degrees of success in which new post-Reformation concepts of ghosts seep through to the populace. So I could go on at length about the numerous similarities and differences between different early modern ghosts, but as it's Friday afternoon and it's the end of semester, I'll end here. I'm not entirely sure if I have a conclusion at this stage, but the closest I've come to it as yet is that concepts of ghosts and devils were increasingly fraught in post-Reformation England, and did not neatly adhere to new conceptions of purgatory or the devil's role in the world. I believe that by looking at the emotional character of ghostly interaction and the types of emotions that ghosts invoked in those fortunate or unfortunate enough to see them, we can learn more about how these beings were interpreted. Reflecting on ghostly narratives, it is possible to argue that in attempting to demonize and thus dismiss belief in ghosts as departed souls of the dead, Protestant reformers unintentionally succeeded in imbuing the ghost with greater terror than ever before and, perhaps in doing so, assuring its survival. Thank you.